afternoon, everyone. My name's Hoda Ali, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Community Impact here at TIFF. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, Black Archives with Maya Cade. As we join together today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you are on and its history. We are located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Bell Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful to work on this land and to bring the work of Indigenous artists to our audiences. TIFF Community Impact is dedicated to increasing access to film for diverse communities across the Greater Toronto Area. We aim to deliver programming that reflects the specific needs and interests and experiences of each group through intentional curation and co-creation with community partners. Throughout our programming, we focus on widening access to TIFF, creating welcoming spaces for participants to connect with one another and to celebrate their creative sides. I would like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, and our major sponsors, RBC, Visa, Bulgari, as well as our major supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto for their continued support. And on behalf of TIFF, I want to take a moment to thank our amazing members and donors for their continued support. A special thank you to our programming partner, BIPOC TV Film. To share a few words, I would like to invite the Executive Director, Cade Douglas. With a reverence for artists coupled with a deep commitment to equity and decolonization, Cade Douglas finds her joy in supporting creative talent in building thriving careers. Please welcome Cade.
Thank you, Huda. Just want to share first a fun fact about me. I'm a history nerd. I'm fascinated by that, particularly Caribbean history and culture. I've also done a lot of scholarship on collective memory and collective traumas, specifically when it concerns Caribbean islands and their intersection or crash course with colonialism and imperialism over the years. So this is why this event is so special to me, that we really get a chance to talk about how are we archiving, curating, and preserving Black Canadian film. In the past few years, some of you may know that there's been lots of conversation about the modernization of the Broadcasting Act. What's come up in that conversation is the preservation of Canadian culture, the protection of Canadian art and artists, and largely protecting us from outside forces. Those of us who are from Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities know that the fight is within the country itself. We constantly have to struggle to find our place, to reclaim our space on this land. We constantly have to prove that we are worthy, that we should be revered, that we should be celebrated, that our cultures deserve to be preserved as well. In the past few months, the Canada Media Fund has been conducting a series of surveys and conversations around the definition of Canadian content. Again, this has brought up really deep and controversial conversations about cultural protection and preservation. And it's really led me to question whose cultures are we preserving, who are we prioritizing in this conversation, and what can we do to better ensure that cinema, television, art from Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities remain relevant in main conversations across Canada. And that's what I always want to ensure, that we are doing that. We all know that cultural preservation is tied with our own liberation, that we must do that work to ensure that we are not forgotten, and also to remind people that we've always been here. Just want to say too that part of this obsession with me, it really started like last year when I first learned about the Black Film Archive and Maya Cade's work. And I've been fascinated with her ever since. And I remember the first time I met her during TIFF last year, I was blown away by this remarkable Black woman who had taken up this cause and who is really pushing to ensure that we are not forgotten in this space, and we're always recognized in the canon of cinema. coming up from the conversation with Maya, it led me to ask a question on Twitter in terms of where can I find scholarship, where can I find archives of Black Canadian film, and that was really, really difficult to find here. So this has become a personal mission of mine to ensure that, and I hope from today's conversation, so many of you are inspired to do the same. So, following today's screening of Black Mother, Black Daughter, directed by Claire Prieto and Sylvia Hamilton, please know their name. I ask you to join us for an onstage conversation with Maya Cade, moderated by Sarah Ty Black. Maya S. Cade is the creator and curator of Black Film Archive, a first of its kind digital archive likened to be the definitive history of Black cinema by Slate.com, and a scholar in residence at the Library of Congress. Cade is an award winning curator, writer, and archivist, receiving special distinctions from the New York Film Critics Circle, the National Society of Film Critics, the Alliance of Women Film Journalists, and the Online Film Critics Society. Originally hailing from New Orleans, Cade is based in Brooklyn. So I hope you guys recognize why I had to bring her here. Sarah Ty Black, who is someone who I deeply admire, and whose anything that they write, I will be picking up. I will read. I will read every single long article in the Globe and Mail that they write. Their work centers on visual media and art making with an emphasis on Black, queer, trans, and disabled futures. They regularly contribute film criticism to the Los Angeles Times and the Globe and Mail. They currently work as international programmer mid-lengths at Hot Docs International Film Festival, and they have been the programmer of Black Gold, a semi-monthly screening series in Toronto dedicated to Black life on screen since 2017. Black's work has appeared on platforms such as Berlinale Forum, Movie Notebooks, CBC Arts, CinemaScope, Variety, Harper's Bazaar, and Refinery 29. They recently appeared as a co-host of Netflix Film's YouTube series Black Film School, and they have worked as a part of the TIFF Vancouver Queer Film Festival, Tribeca Film Festival, Images Festival, and True Falls Film Festival programming teams. In 2021, they were a curatorial fellow at the Flaherty Film Seminar. Thank you, and we look forward to having you join us for the conversation after the film.
Hi.
Hello. Don't mind me, just gonna make myself comfortable for my little body made out of glass. Give it up for Maya.
Oh.
You're giggly today.
I am giggly today, if you caught on. I'm a giggly girl, though.
I know, but you're very giggly today.
I'm excited to be here and seeing this film for maybe the 6th time. It's just...
Yeah, this is my first time seeing it.
Really?
On the screen, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, same. No, and it's so interesting because I was watching the movie and I'm just reminded in the ways that when we talk about knowledge, a lot of the times we're only talking about written things, and we're excavating through research for the archive. We're thinking about how knowledge is transferred through text. But there's so many ways that knowledge is transferred through basket weaving, through quilts, through, especially in Black matriarchal society, that is innate in how we maneuver the world and how we pass on information from one person to another. So seeing this, I'm almost giddy because I'm like, I see myself in this film, and it's just a delight.
I love that, and any kind of like Black intergeneral practice that involves like hands that is often like passed down through family it's so important to have like a record of that. And I'm wondering for you, besides what you've just spoken of, what was it that drew you to this film? Because when I saw it announced, I was like, okay, Maya's giving us the Canadian context.
Well, I think it's important when you talk about archival work, especially when you're thinking about your own family, that you just don't, you think deeply, like you think critically. And I think if I can go back, the idea for Black Film Archive, the actual genesis of it, before there was a conversation that happened with anyone, I really consulted what my grandmother has always taught me, which is that
you don't know anything until you teach it to someone else. And if that is the seed in which my life is true, I thought, what if there was a film that reflected that as well? And Black Mothers, Black Daughters is just really special. I mean, it weaves through this history that shows the magic of film and capturing a moment and capturing a pulse that may not be captured otherwise in this way. And it makes it accessible for people to understand the history and shine a light on it. So yeah, that's why.
See, we are giggly. It's gonna be like this the whole time.
It is.
So walk us through the beginnings of Black Film Archive. What was the kind of motivations behind it? What were your intentions in shaping it?
My motivations, my intentions. Okay, I'll set the scene.
Buckle in, everybody.
It's June 2020. People are having, in America, people are having really interesting conversations about Black representation. And there's this idea that Black film, especially Black media generally, but I gravitate towards film. So there was this idea that Black film was a limited place to learn about Black history from. That Black film's past was traumatic, that it had nothing to offer in the context of which the George Floyd protests were beginning. And I was having conversations with my friends, and they were echoing similar ideas. And not that they were saying that directly, but they were kind of just like, okay, well, there's 12 Years a Slave. There's, this film that we kind of see, that film. But like, where do we exist? So they're asking me for recommendations. And I'm like, this work, like, if I think about cultural forms that once existed, where people would exchange knowledge about the films of the day, the TV shows of the day, like the idea of the water cooler. If that didn't exist online, I'm like, oh, maybe I should build it. Maybe I should think about what does that mean. So I started a Twitter thread where I was listing Black films that are streaming. And I also started reading every book that I owned about Black film because I had accumulated about 60 that I just had, and I was reading a book a day in the pandemic. So there's a lot of that that went into it, and rereading, consulting the things that were within my home because I wasn't leaving my home, and just thinking critically about what to present to Black people, because I think online, I think people take Black people's thirst for knowledge about themselves and use it and wrap it in harm. There are a lot of these like half-truths that exist about Black history online. So I knew if I wanted to enter the space, I had to learn something before I taught it to another person. I had to think critically about what does it mean to be a griot? What does it mean to be, any of those things? And I take that quite seriously. And cultural knowledge and how it's passed on the internet also moves a mile a minute. What is a place that you can reflect on the weight of Black film history? What does that really look like? What does that feel like? And so those questions were the first place I began. And so this is June 2020. I have a Twitter thread, and I'm just, tweeting away.
You're like, what?
And it goes a little viral. I'm like, okay, all right, And then I'm having a conversation with one of my friends one day, and she's just like, you know more than just like kind of linking people places. Because at this point, the thread just was links of films. And she's like, what if you like, and I'm also internally having the conversation that I just explained to you, but, and she's just kind of like, oh, you should build this out. Like and she was like, you should find some money somewhere, or someone can, show you or give you the money to do what she was saying, put on this earth to do. And I'm like, at this point, I'd work for nonprofits, I'd work for startups, and I was like, so much of that world is always waiting on money and always waiting on permission to do the thing. And I'm like, what if I just do the thing? So with no money, no time, no resources.
Yeah.
I built a website, and I took the idea of Black cultural knowledge very seriously.
Yeah.
And that's where I began.
Yeah. Because I mean, a lot of Black folks, and especially a lot of Black folks in film, like we all have our Excel list that is just every film.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But there's a difference between having that kind of personal record, personal kind of memory box to go back to in like your active stages of learning, and versus like the kind of thought that has to go into the space and audience that you're kind of cultivating this history for.
Yeah, and audience is a really interesting question because, or consideration, because, you know, I'm very much a person who's like, I'm going to do the thing, and it's just, you know, not that I don't care about audience, but I very much start with my, like, centering my knowledge first, and that, but this is, and not that this is flipping that idea on its head, but it really is like, okay, what do people need? Because also you can't design, I don't think an archive, if it can't reach the audience you intended to, it's not an archive. You know, so anything like an invisible archive does not exist. So it just is like, okay, how do people navigate the internet? How they've historically navigated it, and how do they navigate it now? And all of those things. And it wasn't just how I navigated the internet, but really what does that look like, and where are Black people finding information online? You know, all of those things that kind of go into that audience question. Yeah, and also what's interesting about this phase of where I was is my very first pandemic era project was archiving my family's history. Yeah, which is I failed to bring up most of the time.
You see my face? I was like, oh, but my eyes were like, what do you mean? I haven't heard about this.
I know. And so I my mom is sending me, I taught myself how to develop photos at home. And my mom is sending me these cameras, these disposable cameras that she never developed across time. I mean, there's cameras from like the 90s that she's just like, here you go. You said you're going to do this, you know, take this seriously. So I started building a digital archive of family photos, and you know, I was on newspapers.com, and if you don't know about newspapers.com, it's my obsession. And you can just find any mention of anything, and it has historical newspaper records from the 1800s to present day for some of the newspapers. So I was, you know, and I was building a digital archive on Google Drive, thinking about naming conventions and, you know, how will my family use this? How do I, you know, make it so that this is useful for them? So that's also happening kind of in the background, and I'm going through that kind of process of like, there's this person I can't name, you know, calling my mom like, who is this? You know, and learning so much about myself and what, you know, internal history is, and how the micro also always impacts the macro, and that kind of being with me as well.
Amazing. It's been 3 years now since you first started Black Film Archive.
Yeah.
What has changed for you or for the archive?
Yeah, I started working on it 3 years ago. Oh, God, in June 2020. It's June 2023. Whew.
I did the math while I was asking you.
3 years. What has changed? I think a lot has changed. When I was first working on it, even though I thought about who was receiving it, I didn't think about how. Like I couldn't concern myself with public reception to it, because then the work would never get done. And I think in this phase of the work, I'm moving a lot slower, actually. Because I know so much more now about digital archiving, I'm also taking a look at the website and re-examining how it functions. So I'm in the process of building a secondary site, is what I'm calling it internally, that the things I've learned from user reception. I get a lot of emails of people being like, "Hey, wait a minute." This film I saw one time in a megaplex is not here. Like, what's going on? And uh, I think I also thought critically about currently, and this is still true. I am the researcher. I am the writer. I am the web designer. I am the person who gathers the photos and all of those things. I thought critically about how things cannot really be created in silo, and I've critiqued myself in that, and thought in building this new. It really isn't new. It's going to be addition to the site, but in building the addition to the site, I've thought, okay, how can I build a foundation to bring some other people into this, and what does that look like? And critiqued myself and this and not that I mean, again, I had no money, so not that it was a choice, right? It was just this thing that I was building, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do it. So, but just ensuring that I build the foundation to bring other people in and know that this isn't just my work, but I really think of this as work for everyone. So,
yeah, honoring like collective work, but then also like acknowledging that like perhaps it would be best for that to be done on a base that's already like well installed.
Exactly. And I think something I've really learned is that we all go forward together. And of course I knew that, but when you have something so precious to you, you almost want to shield yourself from external comment on it, right? You want to be, hey, we'll hold it close to the chest. And I mean, the comments that I've gotten, even in the first 6 weeks of Black Film Archive being live, and this is before any New York Times profile or whatever, right? The comments from people who were using it, I mean, alter the course of its existence. And I was like, this is really, and things that I could not have considered because it just, and or things I did consider, and I was like, oh, I'll do that in a year, or it was like, oh no, you have to do this today, tomorrow. Like adding genres, for example, I added those very quickly because people were like, okay, this is cute, but I need to navigate this a different way. Like time is cute, but that's not what I'm in here for. Like I want to know, okay, what does horror look like?
They're not like us. They don't want to start at 1895.
Exactly. And they're kind of just like, okay, cute. What are the dramas? Where is Sidney Poitier? All of those kinds of things. So yeah.
Take us through your work as a scholar in residence at the Library of Congress. I know you've been researching tenderness in Black film, and it's been so lovely to kind of follow your work and all the work that you're sharing online. So,
yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. I proposed, so I just applied for this residency, maybe a month into Black Film Archive's existence. And I just started imagining that I have two selves, right? I think the first two things most people know about me is that I'm very optimistic, sickeningly optimistic. The second is that I really care about love and tenderness. And so I often are like, oh, this is that side and this side, but I'm like, what combines that work? And I think love is an act of optimism, so they're combined generally, but and archiving, also an act of optimism. But I applied for this. I found out I got it in April 2021. April 2022. And but my idea for the Tenderness Project was similar to the genesis of Black Film Archive, which is to say that a lot of people assumed that Black film's past is only trauma, is only racism, things like that. But I was like, I thought, what if I could offer tenderness and that as a guide to navigate Black film's past? And what does that mean? In working on this, I've really had to sit with this idea, because this is true. When you reduce film to one thing, you minimize it. So how can I, and within my work, how can I use tenderness as a way to maximize how people navigate Black film? So it's really been interesting. I'm building a filmography of tenderness from early film history, so that's
I can't wait.
1898 to the 90s.
Perfect.
Because the Black romance film in the 90s, it felt odd
Yeah, you
to
can't. You can't not.
to not include Love Jones or
Yeah.
anything like that. So this work has really brought out so much in me. It's challenged me. It's it really has been one of those things where you're like, is this really what I want to do? I think like most research is. I
Mhm.
think, sometimes we allow the research to be what causes or what allows the creation. And in this case, I'm saying that this exists, and now I have to go through the research to find its existence.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting way to work on a research question. But I'm now like, okay, yes, like, as much as I'm challenged, I am also so encouraged. So, and I'm also working on a short film where I'm interviewing.
Okay. She has so many secrets. Keeping so many secrets from me.
The short film of tenderness. I'm interviewing Black filmmakers about what tenderness means to them.
Mhm.
Because I think it's, as you're working through film, it feels natural to say, let's create one. let me capture this moment.
Yeah.
Let me capture my thoughts, because I have so many about tenderness from my research. And
Mhm. It's a different kind of archive of film.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm just fully. My body's like, you need to be reclining like a Roman. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening to you. So, tenderness, and, I think that Black representation, which includes Black archives, Black histories, has become very much a form of social currency. And when I look at your work, I feel the care, I feel the love. We've talked about how I love an honest presentation of art and feelings.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how you approach tenderness as a method.
To me, and in my research, no, actually, I'm going to go back to representation, because I think this is.
Oh, I'm going in there too. Don't worry.
To me, I think that in the ways that representation has been discussed and minimized to a formulaic essence, it is the shallowest point of entry to film. And I think when we think about, there must be this, there must be that, and as representation as a checklist, I'm saying, we minimize film in a way that extracts the care from it, extracts the creation. It flattens it. And it's not to say that, and obviously I think that Black cinema is such a sacred and special form of creation. But I also consider that most of the Black films I love, most of the Black filmmakers I know, have started their creation outside of a Hollywood idea of what Black cinema is. And so this Hollywood ideal of representation, this major studio idea of representation, is what flattens the form a bit. Tenderness as a guide, how do I navigate that? I really struggled with what would my research question be. I think all of my work starts with an essential why. Like, why am I doing this? And so for tenderness, I really thought about that the why is, like, Black Film Archive answers one essential question, which is, we existed in the past and abundantly in the past. But it doesn't, I don't think it helps people navigate. Like, I think in a way that people are online just kind of searching for answers. Like, if Black Film Archive is a general map, tenderness is a guide in a different kind of way that allows you to think about, like, for example, Cooley High is on my list of tenderness, for my tenderness film list, and Cooley High from 1975. That's like, these two friends who skip high school for the day, and get in shenanigans, and also, have real life happen to them in this course of this day. And when I think about their friendship, though, and
Yeah.
how that is what keeps them going on, that's
Mhm.
inherently a tender act. The way that they navigate the world together, and I won't spoil the ending of the film, but they just it's such a regenerative act between them. I'm like, that's inherently tenderness, and
Mhm.
I just hope that my work isn't seen as like the definitive or da da da.
Yeah.
It is, but it allows people to will other forms of creation into
Mhm.
the world. So I think tenderness as a guide allows the possibility of that.
Mhm. Like, cuz when tenderness seeks out tenderness, when it seeks out itself, it's guiding itself, and it's
Yes.
no longer an issue of, oh, this film is good or positive or negative representation, which I don't think is even a
I don't
discussion.
think representation can even be broken down to positive or negative.
Exactly.
There are so in that way, like
Mhm.
it's not that simple. It cannot be
Yeah.
that simple. Yes.
Yeah. Which is why I love this like tenderness as method, because it seeks out like
Yes.
it's going to a hot spot of tenderness and
Yes.
care, and you find what you find, and it's not by virtue of saying eliminating things. You know what I
Yeah, and
mean?
as Sadia Hartman says,
Here we go.
oh god,
Okay.
in a moment of tenderness, it's something like the world feels possible, a
Yeah.
lifetime of possibility emerges, and it's so true. Even through these films, and my definition of tenderness is an act of tenderness between two Black people, whether that's romantic, familial, community, or through friendship. So it covers the gamut. I have about 300 films that I have listed, which is really wild to me. But yeah, it really, and I'm also annotating them.
Yeah.
So
That's the thing. You're giving it life within its place in the archive. It's not just a
Exactly.
list or,
exactly.
when I was in grad school and no one wanted to teach me a single Black goddamn thing.
Yeah.
It's like you or I and other people who identify in that way, we were living in the index of books. You get a name, you get a date, and there's something to be said for that kind of embodied annotation. That's
Yeah.
just really lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm wondering, how do you see archives
Yes.
in relation to questions of Black representation and questions of what film canons may or may not look like?
Whew. Okay. Canonization. Let's get into it, right? What's interesting, and I'm gonna answer this question. Well, it may seemingly seem like I'm not answering it, but I am. When I think about film distribution, and if I think about the ways a film is distributed now, that's streaming, that's theatrical. So many people assume that YouTube is an archive, that distributors are an archive, but distribution depends on very racist questions to have a film meet the market. The questions being, has this film gotten a New York Times profile? Has this film won Cannes? These are the things that require distribution, but it also depends on other people recognizing something that isn't even in their purview. That like the idea of Black film, or to even think of it in a meaningful way, doesn't occur to them. So it's so interesting that distribution is still in that state. And of course, it's not everyone, but but distribution really does depend on other people's work to become possible. Has it won hot docs? Has it won? And not to say that the people who are the programmers that are doing negative work, but I think canonization, right? It is not just the archival work. It's not just the curator. It's not
it's capital.
It's capital. It's these systems. And then if we only think of film as capital, we never see the film. If it's only something that we're exchanging, we're exchanging hands to make money. Well, film will die tomorrow. I mean, the art of film, it just, there has to be more. And so an archive as a act of optimism, because archives are not just what's in the archive, it's also what's not in it. And that act of curation, I mean, I think that archivists, curators, preservationists have to believe that a future where capital is not king exists.
Mm-hmm.
And
otherwise, it's an elegy.
Exactly. And so to me, canonization, and I will say I did submit, my Sight and Sound ballot. And I know how much that, that works into canonization, and I'm not, I can critique myself in that act, right? But I also know how much the Black filmmakers who were listed on that list, how much it changed, even if it was their day. To me, that was enough. Like, when they asked me with 3 days notice, I will say, to write the essay for Julie Dash, being on the list, I was like, I mean, if you're asking me in this late, I feel like if I don't write this, she will not have one.
Exactly.
So, it's a lot.
It's the February 27th Black History email.
Oh, exactly. Like, it's like, oh my God, we really want to have something. It's, it's not the 11th hour. It's the 11:30th hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, that's so often how it goes. And I feel like, something I have been thinking a lot about with myself is I've had the opportunity to meet filmmakers in the archive, actors in the archive, and I think that listing them here is only the first part.
Mm-hmm.
True care also extends to doing everything I possibly can to ensure they can do the work that they want to do.
Exactly.
It's not just about me positioning myself to be this voice or that thing. It's also, and not also, but it is, it is ensuring that the people who, whose work I'm honoring it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm taking their livelihood very seriously. And I'm ensuring that I don't misrepresent them. Because as I was saying earlier, so much of archival work depends also on racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on section headings that, exist outside of how Black communities think of film or discuss film to each other. So if I'm duplicating those ideas, then I'm failing the community I'm serving. I'm failing the actors.
Absolutely.
And if I repeat, how, one time I was reading a description of Do the Right Thing, and it said,
I don't even want to hear.
it said, I think something like a Black man throws a trash can.
That's it. That's
into
the movie. Wrap it up.
a white man's establishment, and a riot ensues. Like, if I just duplicate how Black film is described, externally, I'm also duplicating the harm that has been done. So, yes, I don't really know if I answered your question.
You did, and you led me into a question that I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
And I was wondering if you are familiar with the work of Michel Rolf-Trouillot.
Oh,
I'm
no.
not pronouncing it right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mom. My mom's French speaker. For those of you who might not know who he is, he was a Haitian anthropologist whose work focused a lot on what it means to represent, record, or re-represent the past. And yes, I have a prop. One of his most well-known works is Silencing the Past. I've brought it with me. I'm going to read you a quote.
Oh,
I'm really making the stage mine today.
Oh, get into it.
My HelloFresh coupon bookmark. So in this quote that I'm about to read out, he's referencing authenticity not as a type of knowledge, but as a relationship to what could possibly be known at the time. And he says, to say what is known must include the present, but it may be less obvious that historical authenticity resides not in the fidelity to an alleged past, but in an honesty vis-a-vis the present as it re-represents the past.
That reminds me of something I often quote, which is Toni Morrison.
It's a quote off because if you quote the next quote that I'm going to use...
Well, Toni Morrison says...
This is the weirdest episode of Wild 'N Out I've ever been on.
Toni Morrison says that the past is a place of expansion. That is this
No.
She says, she says the past, basically she believes that the past is more future than the present. And she goes on to say that when I look to the past, there's infinite amount of information that I can yield from it. And that is really the idea that I stand on. And it's very mirrored in that quote as well, which is this, it's a true act of care to revisit the past. Like, you cannot do this without the depth of understanding that's possible, contextualizing that understanding, and making it accessible to people. Please continue.
So I was thinking, and that's what made me bring out the book. I'm also very much in like a, what book said this? Like, I'm kind of like a madman at home. There's books everywhere right now. Yeah. So I was thinking about the kind of like slippage that happens between like the recording of history, which is obviously colonial, white supremacist guided way of recording history, and the living of it as it was. And I'm wondering, how do you navigate engaging with histories as they're presented to you, while also witnessing or representing the kind of lived knowledge that might not be accounted for?
Yeah. Ooh. I think the first thing I had to really confront within myself, especially when I expanded the archive to include, it always included places outside of America, but to focus on places outside of America, I had to really confront my Americanness and the biases that come with being a Black American. And there's so many that and even how Haitian films or Black French films are described to a Black American, knowing that that's not inherently doing justice by the film, and also confronting, even when I watch it, that I need to do more reading on this to make it so that I am not extrapolating the same biases, the same weak points that exist and that have always existed for this film. So really, I don't think any of this work is possible without true acts of care. And I don't want to repeat myself, but it really is true. Of just, I think to be an archivist, you have to confront the worst of yourself and ensure that you're not passing. Oh, and also, and even the worst. I want to rephrase. You have to confront the truth of yourself, the truth of who you are and the space you occupy, because if you're not doing so, you can never confront the material in front of you, and you can never really take care of it. And the truth of myself, and also how that influences how I see what's in front of me and how I express what's in front of me to other people. I think, a lot of the work in the archive is really difficult, especially if I think about, well, I will give you an example. I was lecturing at Yale. I was a guest lecturer in a class, and the student came up to me and it was just like, hey, I always tell people they can ask me whatever they want. There's no holds off. And she just said, how do I really reckon with how, like, sex on screen? And this is a big thing for younger people. I think in this age of sex being a constant, that they are really grappling, what does it mean to think of tenderness, sex, desire, all of these things on screen. And, so often your immediate response to someone who's slightly older is to be, to think, okay, well, sex on screen, there's like 10, it's the least amount of sex on screen ever in time right now, right? But then I also, like, you have to, if someone is coming to you, and it was with an honest question, you have to really, remove the ego, remove the assumption, and really make space to hear them, and make space to give them an honest answer, which is to say, and also the question was also getting to this idea of, how can I watch a film that was made under these conditions, and these conditions being imperfect ones. But it also is my role, I feel like, to remind people that nothing is made in perfect conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. And I wish there was a reality in which that could be true, but, you know, and also in ensuring in that question or any other question I get that it is coming from a place of, you know, I am responsible for the knowledge that is being shared. I cannot repeat the terrorism that's been
Mm-hmm.
done to the materials. And a part of that is also taking seriously people who are trying to learn or who do not have the understanding, knowledge, perfect way to say it, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that my responsibility in this position is also to be a bridge, be a boat, may it be, whatever it is, to get people to the knowledge that they
Mm-hmm.
have to get to. So,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the first step. And then the second step is like working towards like sustainable futures where
exactly.
the kind of work under capital that's happening in that can be undone and reshaped and reworked.
Exactly. And something I really want to make clear is that, when Black Film Archive first launched, there were offers, I mean, very serious offers to be like, hey, do you want to like join my organization? Do you want to, and
no, I
just
don't.
this idea that, this Black person did the work, so I don't have to if I just buy it.
Yeah.
If I just take it under my wing, then suddenly I have seemingly done the work and I could just pay their salary for 2 years until people forget about it, right? But if I decided that I was going to do something, if I was going to create something with no resources, no time, no money, then I have to honor that person who created that and that belief that this work had to exist and I had to will into existence despite those facts. I have to continue honoring that and continue honoring something that exists that, is, not to brag, but when you Google Black film, it is like the second thing that comes up, right? You like I that's a sacred in the way that the internet works. That's a very sacred space that I can't just sell off to the highest bidder because it requires capital or whatever it may be. I think I really want to make sure that I'm not like I'm never operating from a place that what's done is final or this this ask of here we'll throw some money at you is that's the future that any of this work deserves.
And I think something that was started in such a personal way with such integrity with such little resources, it's like I feel similarly about Black Gold. I'm like, no one's coming in here unless they're invited. You know what I mean? Like, we have to protect the integrity of the spaces we make because there's so few of them.
And even if it in 5 years, 6 years, whatever, I don't know, if it Black Film Archive is housed or something, know that it is because that was the future that had to be possible for it. Because I think also like the thing that's the unsaid is that I'm now splintered in so many different directions. Like, what does that really mean now, right? And I have to, as I was saying in the beginning, like, you have to believe in something enough to know to have a life after you. That you have done the work, that you have done the study, you have learned the craft enough that it will have a future. And sometimes that means that you make those really difficult choices. And not that I'm willing, I'm not that I'm hoping that, but that is also true. And this work under capitalism, it really is interesting. Like, I want to make sure that Black Film Archive is free, accessible, but that also means a lot of different things, right? The traffic is growing bigger on the site. There's so many things that I now have to do to ensure that that's possible, that I also have to position myself to do to ensure that's possible. And I think the truth of it all, and the truth of anything, is that you'll be faced with impossible questions. And that the only thing you really have is integrity. Like, it's that, they can take so much from you, but what you put your name on, what you put, your livelihood on, they can't take that away. So, yeah.
Quote Tina Turner, I still have my name.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
I could take everything, but her name is what she wanted.
When I'm thinking of archives and Black life and Black history, I'm always thinking of Toni Morrison quote, not the one that you use, just another one.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a second dab in here for Toni today, where she says, I stood at the border, stood at the edge, and claimed it as central. I claimed it as central and let the rest of the world move over to where I was. And so, remembering again my cursed grad school days and how cursed archives are as spaces, not just records.
Yes.
I'm wondering, how do you navigate archival work alongside the knowledge that, as far as traditional archival practices have gone in North America and the Western world, to be searching for traces of Black life, which are often just that, traces, even as expansive as we know Black life to be, often means to be working inside them from within the margins within these institutions.
Yeah, I'll give my residency at the Library of Congress is a very good example. I went in with a question, with an idea, because I had to know what I was searching for, because it did not exist in the way that I that it could have, right? Because archives exist for a general public, right? And they make assumptions about who that general public is and what that general public is interested in. So I'm really excavating from the the corners of the library. I mean, I went a few weeks ago and I mentioned this TV show that I didn't know they had this whole time, and suddenly opened a whole new avenue for what was possible. I think it's really similar to what I was saying earlier, that I believe in what I've created. So the research will never will its existence, because how people have collected the research may not even speak to the creation of what I am trying to do. But I know that it's in there, even if it's in the margins, and it requires patience. It requires an appetite for true study. And also it requires not just asking the librarians, because what happens is they're going through a database that is collected in a very particular way.
Yeah.
It's taking the time to go through every possible resource, which at this point, in the Library of Congress's film collection, because I've been in residency for a year now, I've had the opportunity to do. It's going through every book that they have, using the index of the book, or using the bibliography of the book, and knowing that, okay, if this exists, then this must exist, and also taking careful notes that I can pass on to the librarian and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Sometimes it really comes from reformatting your question for someone who may not be understanding your curiosity. But I think the most essential thing that has helped me on my research and any institution I go into is having a thought partner and a librarian, because that really opens up the whole floodgates of what is possible. If that is not true, though, it really is believing in your work. And also for the library, I've actually had the opportunity to fill in some of their gaps, of kind of telling them that, oh, this is from my research, oh, this just might be misclassified, or but that's fun, and librarians love that. Well, if you're nice about it. Because I think the really, at the end of the day, this is a generalization, but I'll say it, the quest for knowledge, all of us are hoping to arrive at this perfect place, but it doesn't exist. So we must confront everything, and what's done. And again, what's done is not final. And most librarians really understand that, what we have always done, it will not get us to where we're going. And that's always true in research. How people have organized thought will not get us to where may not get us to where we need to start thinking. So I'm here to shake the table,
Yeah, I think what also gets lost sometimes when we see the products of research of archives is the kind of alternate intimacies that take place, especially when Black folks, Indigenous folks as well, but Black folks in particular are trying to find ourselves in the archive, and we have to. It's a different way of looking for something. Like, there's so many times when someone's been like, "How did you get the rights to that film?" And I'm like, "Listen, I was on bodybuilder.com forums for 4 hours, and then I got rerouted to an old Angel Fire." Like,
well, I think, and you're also bringing up a really good point, which I failed to say. I think knowledge, Black knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, what have you,
it's not meant to be recorded in this way.
Exactly. It doesn't always exist at an institution. My research didn't begin in a library, right? Like, there are other ways you have to seek out, because they never took it in. I can go through as many corners as I want, but it may not just be there. You have to find the ways that, community conversation, audio histories, like, there's so many ways, understanding intimate knowledge that can only be passed on from person to person. And I think the other thing that's essential for me is how I really, the Black press has really been a really interesting way to discover those ways, because they will talk about a party, a gathering, and you will be like, these people knew each other. Like, there's just so many ways to that the library can be a jumping off point to discovering knowledge that doesn't exist there, if you just find the secrets,
the social spaces, the bodies and minds and spaces.
Exactly.
We have 10 minutes left? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask one of my questions, and then we can go to audience questions. And I'm being selfish because I want to know the answer, and I'm sorry. I think so much of Black feminist thought and practice relies on the act of citation. And I'm wondering, how do you engage with citational practices in your work?
Oh my gosh. What is so interesting is that the Black Film Archive 2.0, as I've referenced, I'm literally building it for that fact. So my hope for the next iteration of Black Film Archive is that it doesn't just include my words, it includes where I reference the knowledge that I've gotten for how you publicly see it. Because I think the whole point of Black Film Archive for me is not for me to be the only voice, but to be a space where people can challenge, question, bring to life new things. And I think a way that is possible is by citing others and bringing and elevating that work into the site. So that's really on my mind. It really is, at the heart of what I'm hoping to do for this next phase of its life. It is a living archive. So
it's also like, when people come into a relation with that form of citation, they're then going to be able to follow where you've gone and go off in their own historical archival paths in a really like generative way.
Exactly. And my biggest hope is that I'm able to show people that this work is possible. And if that's all I do in this life, then I'm really okay with that.
Yeah. Okay, Sagittarius. So we have a little bit of time for questions.
You can ask me anything.
Raise your hand and speak loudly so everyone can hear you. I see you.
Hi. I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan. I've been following you since Twitter, and I'm so glad that you're here. My question is about like ownership and like physical copies of things, just considering like how many streaming platforms are merging and stripping certain titles from their
audience plant. Audience plant. You know how much she likes to talk about physical media.
Oh, what's so interesting, and this is a secret. It's not really a secret because we're being recorded, but I'm actually moving towards collecting things and finding a way to bring them to the public. So that's one answer to your question. The streaming crisis is really interesting. And so their question was about ownership of streaming media. And it really is a crisis to me. I think if streaming tricked people into believing that every media that's ever existed is online, right? But we know that's not true. And especially when people believe that, or especially when it happens that it just suddenly removed, like out of nowhere. So we really are in crisis with that. And um, I think, there was this tweet that went viral the other day that I've been thinking about. And we had dinner last night. I brought this up. But there's the tweet that went up, and it's for someone who was a media worker. And they said, well, piracy is inherently the opposite of um,
Don't ask me. Don't
I know,
ask me.
I know.
Something unions, something.
Piracy is inherently the opposite of media workers' work, right? But that cannot be true if corporations own media and they aren't protecting it. If the whole belief of corporations was to protect and distribute media, but we're seeing that not happening, and even films from 2020, right? They just no longer exist because a corporation decided that they do not need to be in the public because they want to save on tax money. So I think that the future is really precarious. I feel like we're in another silent age, or a silent film era, which when that happened, a lot of the films were just destroyed. So what do we do to protect media? That's a really big question right now, especially in the streaming age. Things that are streaming born and have never had a home video release. I don't really have the answer, but I will leave you with the only way to really own a film is with home media. That's the only way to protect the integrity of the film that as you know it to be. Because when a film is streaming, they could, a company could decide, I don't want any curse words, or, this act of racism in this film has no value. Let me remove it. So I think home video, all this to say, home video.
She's only like halfway warmed up too.
I know. I'm like, I'll try to be brief, but home video is the way. So, thank you.
In the front.
I had a question about black villains.
I
have this thing where I really love villainy, and I find that black films or black people are often not represented in films as villains.
Oh, I don't think that's true.
I found that I don't want to have like a thing, but I really have found that that oftentimes with especially marginalized folks within the black community, like you don't get like good black female villains, for instance. Or if you do, it's like in this Tyler Perry way, which I love. But my question being, I want to know your favorite black villains.
So there are many, many, many during the race era of film. So the black independent film boom of the 1930s and 40s, the race films have so many black villains. Do you mind emailing me? My email is Maya, MAYA, at blackfilmarchive.com, because I will give you a list. Any other questions? Don't be shy. Okay.
Hi, Maya.
Hi.
Okay, hi, Sarah. Hi. My name is Gasela. I'm also from Twitter. Yeah. I have a question, and it's related not just to your creation of the Black Archive, but also your presence in film as a Black woman.
Yes.
Because when people think film critic, they think, Roger Ebert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you find, like, how do I want to phrase this? How do you feel people have responded to Black Archives and you since its creation? And by people I mean like industry.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is 3 months into Black Film Archive's creation, the New York Film Critics Circle gave me a Heritage Award, which is their award for things that have changed the fabric of film. And it was kind of the industry's nod, at least to the critics that were in that circle, to say, we see you, we support you. Because what happens so often is Black women's labor is made invisible once the people who are living and to witness pass or move on to another interest. So this and the 4 awards I've won since really kind of speak to that, but to answer the real heart of your question, how have they been received? It's really interesting because I think when people have an idea of you and don't know you, it's a fascinating thing to like kind of balance. I think I've made a lot of industry friends, but the thing I always remember is that my genius existed before they had knowledge of it. And it will exist once they decide they're not interested in knowing me anymore. So I think to me that the industry friends or whatever have you, that isn't the work. That isn't the thing I'm here for. And the recognition I can't minimize what it does for my work, but I will find a way out of no way, which is, Black women's way of living. Yeah, literally. So I don't try to lean so heavily on that. I think the work has to continue with or without their gaze. Thank you.
Amazing. Please give it up for Maya. The one, the only, the hair, the laugh.
Thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you all for joining us here, and thank you to TIFF, and thank you to Cade and BIPOC TV and Film for making this happen. I've been saying to you and to Cade, events like this are the ones that kind of feed my soul, and I wish I got to do them more often. So I'm savoring this. So
thank you.
Thank you
for the wonderful moderation.